Hi, everybody. Welcome in as part of our Include Me program. We're excited to continue our Parent Info Session Transition webinar. If you're joining us for this month of April, you can see it hopefully there on the screen. Let them try building problem-solving skills at home and school. I'm particularly excited about this. I'm honored to be able to be the one to share some information with you, some ideas, because we're going to take a look at problem-solving and decision-making and how that can really set our students, our children, our individuals up for success. Hi, everyone. My name is Nick Webster. I'm the Director of Educational Initiatives with the ARC of Pennsylvania and the Include Me program. I'm also a co-facilitator with many of my colleagues here, operating on pre-employment training programs using creative arts, drama therapy. I'm a drama therapist, so role play, character work. It's all different pieces that kind of pop in here that you'll see sprinkled throughout our quick little 30-minute session together. If you're joining us on the Zoom, you've signed up. Welcome, glad to see you. You can always participate, pop into the chat. I'll try to engage with those questions, but we'll save those towards the end for the Q&A portion so we can take those offline and not on the recording for Facebook Live, Instagram. Hi, Mom. Glad to see you participating. So without that being said, let's go ahead and jump into some of these pieces because we have so much to cover and so little time, as Willy Wonka said. I'm trying to do this in a safe zone, judgment-free zone as much as possible, really hoping for some open and honest dialogue, thoughts, or questions. I'll be the first one to admit if you have a question, I don't know the answer to it, instead of just tap dancing and trying to figure it out, I'll make sure to be upfront with you and honest and let you know, but hopefully we can get your contact if I don't have a good answer, and we can engage some of our Include Me team to make sure that your question gets the consideration and thoughts that it deserves. I said this before, but I'm saying it again to you. 30 minutes of problem-solving information and ideas. We're going to go over what it is, why it matters, and some of the different pieces that make up problem-solving. Might seem straightforward, but it sometimes can be a very, very complex situation, especially depending on what the problem might be. And then at the end, for any of our folks on Zoom, we'll also have that unrecorded offline, although it will be virtual, Q&A session for any of those personal questions or individual questions that we might be able to help problem solve or connect you to some resources about. So why problem solving matters? Well, it's an essential skill for life, school, employment, relationships, interpersonal, or romantic pursuits, whatever it might be. Problems come up everywhere we look. Probably too many for some of you. You know, you're trying to slam that closet door shut with problems. It's critical for independence, interdependence, and self-advocacy, right? With goal setting, we're identifying goals. Also, we're identifying challenges or steps towards getting to those goals. Also asking for help, maybe disclosing a disability and how to go about that, who to talk to, and what exactly to share or not share, depending on the circumstance. Also, we know that students with disabilities, some may need explicit instructions, might need a step-by-step basis for us to kind of process through and create a problem-solving structure that works for that individual child or student. And ultimately, it builds confidence. We see this time and time again, especially when it comes to employment goals or having to take on some sort of work or career objective. Sometimes that creates some insecurities, some vulnerabilities, and can really show a lack of confidence. That lack of confidence comes a lack of comfortability, and that's where we might see where folks might not want to continue with it, might want to quit or no longer keep going or persevere through it. And so problem solving can really help us kind of work on some of those resiliency skills, build up some of that independence in sometimes very easy ways that we might not always think about, but there are learning opportunities throughout our daily life, daily routines, that we can really start to cultivate what those problem solving skills are. I hope you like my graphics. I got a couple silly ones here. Problem solving in decision making, they go hand in hand, right? Like peanut butter and jelly, or if you've got a nut allergy, milk and cookies. I don't eat dairy, Nick. Okay, almond milk and cookies. Yeah, Oreos are vegan. Did you know that? So you can have almond milk, a little vegan cookie, be good to go there. I know Oreos vegan. Who knew? Somebody knew. Somebody out there knew. might be you. But it's really important, right? Because within all of the problem solving skills that we're looking to develop and build upon, decisions must be made. And decisions can sometimes be the real Achilles heel, the real challenge behind some of our decision making and problem solving, and just kind of seeing how that all ties together. So let's go ahead. Let's take a step further down the rabbit hole and talk a little bit about problem solving and what kind of it looks like. You know, similar to reading, it's not just as straightforward as it might seem upon the surface, right? There's codes, there's interpretations, we're gathering information, and then we have to identify many of the different pieces for what tactics or strategies or actions do we want to step forward with. So, a very basic way of just kind of breaking it down, thinking about it maybe just from a different alternate angle there, some of those action steps. Number one, when it comes to problem solving, we need to identify what the problem is. Often easier said than done. Sometimes we're identifying the symptoms. Sometimes we're identifying what makes us uncomfortable. Sometimes we don't actually get to the root of the problem. So we might think that we're solving a problem, but in actuality, we might be creating or contributing to a different problem or something that's not actually the main central problem. And so our first step, if we're identifying the problem, also, let's say we identify it correctly, we're trying to see, does it require action? Do I need to move on it? And this sometimes gets a little bit interesting because sometimes we are inconvenienced by problems. Sometimes there are small challenges that we might have with different individuals in our social spheres. But not every problem requires specific action to make. So if we're looking at these as little just micro skills to develop with your children, your students, whoever it is, the reasons why you're coming on to this webinar series is we need to understand the problem. And then we need to understand, is it a problem that needs to be acted upon? And maybe a timeline. Does it need to be acted upon now? Or does it need to maybe get to a certain point where it actually becomes something where I do need to step in, I do need to confront or use my self-advocacy skills, whatever that might be. But when is the point where it actually requires action? And sometimes that can be often overlooked in just identifying how large or small that problem actually is. Let's say it's a big problem just to move us down for these bullet points, because if no problem ever was big enough, then probably this would be the end of the PowerPoint. But figuring out the steps or tactics to resolve it. And I think a lot of this time it comes with trial and error. And sometimes when we're supporting a student with a disability or an individual, you know, this is where we can kind of come in to help with that informed choice piece, right? Maybe generating steps, generating tactics of how to combat or deal with a problem might be a challenging. There might be a barrier there. So we can kind of present maybe some pros and cons. Maybe we can help create a list of different ideas and then kind of talk through them. Maybe even if you're feeling actingly inclined, maybe playing out what some of those different pieces are, but really trying to create a word cloud, a list, a word bank or a step bank of different steps and tactics that we might take to confront a certain issue. I've got that bee up there. Not only is that bee cute, has a great set of glasses, but it's also to remind me a little bit of a particular problem. There is a bee. Let's say, example, there is a bee that is buzzing around and it's buzzing around in your space. Might certainly be a problem. You might be terrified of bees. You might be deathly allergic to bees. But we need to understand, okay, the bee is the problem. Is the bee the problem? If the bee is the problem, okay, the bee's a problem, you know, now does it require action? Because if that bee is the problem and we try to take steps or tactics, maybe an aggressive manner, maybe we're trying to swat or heaven forbid, squash that poor little bumblebee. If you don't hit it the first time, You might have a different problem where that bee might come back, and that bee was just buzzing around, minding its own business, maybe being in your space, your shared space collectively. But now you've ticked off that bee, and now you've got a different problem, a different thing that you're going to have to confront and deal with. And most likely, hopefully, it's not a hornet or a wasp, because then you're going to have to create a whole new set of tactics and steps. So really kind of looking at the problem and figuring out some steps or tactics to resolve it. Ultimately, once you get that steps, those lists, try. Try solving that problem. Does it work? This is a great opportunity. It's a natural part of learning, right? Where we try something out, we see what works and what doesn't, and then we adapt and adjust. This is learning that we see happen everywhere, from out in corporate world all the way down to the sandbox and the playground at the local, play space. Try solving that problem, get that information, and now we have an opportunity for feedback or reflection. And if feedback is something challenging, that's where you, as a loved one, a family member, maybe a support staff, you can come in and try to cultivate that, try to work within that and see what's going on. And what you do when it doesn't work. Maybe we're dealing with failure. Hey, I tried that thing and it doesn't work. And now we have some particular challenges that could come up. But if we can work on that resiliency skills, if we can reinforce that perseverance, that opportunity to go one direction, stop, take a step back, maybe look at the problem from a more objective point, and maybe we can pick a different angle to go. Sometimes just those skills, even if we don't actually get to solving the problem, can set that individual student up for successes and greater independence in future iterations or where future circumstances might come up with issues. Right. So if the problem, doesn't work, what are some other steps that go into it? Maybe it's a whole micro beat, micro skill of asking for help. Not only how to do that, but also how to identify who I want to seek out help for. Maybe it's as simple as just moving to that next step, that new tactic, trying something else out, or trying again after something fails and reviewing the problem. Talked about that a little bit. I always get ahead of these slides, Nick. You always do it. That picture there is Billy Goat. Billy Goat's Gruff. It's one of the kind of ways that we set up a scene. If you're not familiar, it's an old fable about three Billy Goats Gruff who wanted to cross a bridge. That was their goal, to cross the bridge to get into the pasture on the other side. But there was an obstacle. There was something standing in their way. And that was a troll, a big, mean, maybe not mean, maybe misunderstood, a troll standing in their way of their goal. So they have to come up with different tactics, different strategies to get across that bridge. And so when we're choosing a new tactic, we can look at all those different things. In this particular instance, we're looking at potential flattery, maybe bribery, maybe intimidation, maybe trickery, deceit. All of those are different tactics that we can try out. So if you are wanting to explore just different ways to go through, provide a little bit of storytelling, a nice little bit of structure there, Billy Goat's Gruff is a nice, easy fable and fairy tale for you to build upon some of those problem-solving skills. Some common challenges that we see often in some of our work. And the Include Me program, if you're not familiar with it, we support school districts all across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. We're in schools from kindergarten all the way up to senior year. Obviously, Transition A is a particular focus for us. But some common challenges we see with some of our students is what you see there on the screen. First and foremost, waiting for the knight in shining armor. If I just wait enough, somebody in my circle will solve the problem for me. Maybe that's a loved one, maybe that's a teacher, maybe that's a peer, a friend, sibling, or another family member. Challenges we see if we're waiting always for somebody to intervene, somebody to step in and help us out, then we don't really need to develop those resiliency skills. We don't really need to step in there and persevere to try to solve that problem for ourselves. Other problem, like I said with the bee situation, we might have identified the wrong problem. The bee was buzzing in our space, and we've now either ticked the bee off or the bee has come at us, and now we might have some potential other challenges, some other problems to try to work our way through. Common challenges also include anxiety, shutdown, or meltdowns, right? Often, especially when we're stuck, might be overwhelmed, might be frustrated, or might be completely lost as what to do. We can see some of those different challenging behaviors sort of flare up. One suggestion is knowing, you know your child, right? Better than anyone else. And so being able to identify what might be some of those signals, those observations, those physical things we can see or hear that help identify for us that we might need to take a step back, might need to find a pause. Maybe there's a sensory room or a calming technique, a self-coping strategy, something that lets us kind of step back and approach that problem solving with a more clear head and even emotional level. Failure can also be a common challenge. Sometimes we don't want our loved one to go through a failure. We don't want them to feel that hurt, that loss, or that frustration. So we kind of intercede. We get in front of it before it happens, right? Try to make that life as smooth and as easy, as wonderful as possible. But failure is a great teacher, and failure is really what helps spur that learning so that they don't have to sit and dwell in that failure in the same way. They're not repeating a cycle of failure. So failure can often be our greatest teacher. Communication challenges as well, without getting into specifics. And also, like I said before, that limited experience making decisions. So the parent's role, what's an idea, something to try on? And not all of these roles might fit for each person, but I invite you to explore and reflect a little bit on yourself of what's the role I usually take? Am I the fixer? Am I a coach, a teacher, or a guide? And which ones can I pull from or maybe try on or try to bring into some of these problems that my child, my student deals with, and explore what might work? How can I develop and enhance that collaborative or help relationship with my individual student? Try guiding questions instead of providing the answer. This is what we suggest a lot to paraprofessionals and teachers in the room. Instead of just giving them the answer, writing it on the worksheet, or whispering in their ear what the correct answer is, try some verbal prompts, right? Indirect. What can we try first? What's something you could ask? What worked before? Or what do you think the problem is? And I invite some tonal shifts as well. When I say tonal, I mean how you say it, right? We know that body language is important, words are important, but it's often how you say something. I invite you to take on the idea of the old chin rub, right? Huh. I really have no idea what 2 + 2 is. What do you think it is? And trying on these maybe confusion, right? A lot of our students want to help, want to provide that level of answer, or maybe curiosity, right? Just playing with some of the different ways that you might set up these questions could be a little bit softer and easier and more approachable than, well, what are you going to try first? Uh-huh. Who could you ask? Right? Whoa, we've got these different things. Is this judgment coming in? Are they angry at me? Do they want me to solve the problem sooner than when I'm able to? So just being mindful and playing around with some of those tones might allow you to flow between some of these different roles that a parent can take on. This shift helps build independence, and really that little sign up there, which is supposed to tell me about a mirror, allows us to provide some feedback opportunities and reflections. We're asking questions, we're open to what the different thoughts and suggestions are. And instead of directing, telling them, you have to go that way, you have to do this thing, we really provide a little more openness and flexibility. And that's going to give us a more honest perspective and reflection on where their problem solving skills are, where certain things might be lacking or needing to be built up, areas for growth, or really just understanding better how they might approach other situations, other challenges or problems in their life. Everyday life is about practice, right? Looking at real life opportunities, from schoolwork, like forgot homework, didn't study for a test, to other pieces that everybody deals with. Lost my keys, my wallet, my tablet, my phone. Sometimes it might be interpersonal, right? Conflict with neighbors, family members, classmates. or trouble with assignments, being confused or uncertain or doubting themselves and their own skills and ability. Sometimes it can be as simple as just maybe not enough money to purchase an item or a meal. So we can kind of, pop into there and see and understand a little bit of where their mind is going. How do they see the problem, and what challenges or tactics maybe are they going to approach for it? Let me give you an example here just to kind of bring it home. So a child forgot their lunch, right? A classic scenario, and they have some options. And you could feed this to your child. But I invite you to ask those open questions, right? Okay, so what are some things we could do if we forgot our lunch? And you can see what there are listed there on the screen, right? I'm not hiding it. Ask the school office. Sure, we could buy our lunch for that day. Hopefully they have money. They might not. We could call home, all different options. Those last two, you might go, whoa, why would I put that as an option? And I think it's important though, because we talk about natural consequences with problem solving and decision making. You can handle a problem the right way. You can handle the problem a lot of other ways too. And that might solve your problem, but it might create other problems, like that bee example we explored a little bit earlier. I think it's very important to list out, especially in a safe learning environment with a family in a trusted role, to talk about these different consequences, because that might be what comes up or the option that is faced in that particular moment. A child forgot their lunch. We don't want this to happen, but they might suffer. They might just not eat lunch that day. They might not tell anybody they didn't bring lunch. They might not answer when somebody asks if they want something for lunch. They might just sit in silence because maybe they're embarrassed. Maybe they're ashamed. Maybe they don't even know what's going on because it's just so unusual from their normal routine. They could steal someone else's lunch. Oh, wow. Nick, are you telling us that we should tell our kids to commit crimes? No, not that much. But I do think, especially in a learning environment, we should talk through what those different options are. In our pre-employment training, when we talk about dealing with conflicts with, coworkers or different pieces like that, I often let things get a little bit off the rails, not too much, but my coworker has been really rude to me. What am I going to do? I guess I'm going to punch him in the face. Interesting. That is certainly one way to deal with a disrespectful coworker. And wow, that requires a lot of courage, a lot of pieces there. But just taking them through what some of the natural consequences and potentials might be. And yeah, you can go as far as, to ask a cop to come over and role play that with you. But you could also just talk about how that might break the relationship, how it could lead to job loss, how it could forever create a tension in that workplace. There's so many different ways, but if we at least just talk and acknowledge some of the consequences from some of the maybe less ideal tactics, that might provide a little greater insight and ripples into many other ways that your student, your child might approach some of these conflicts and some of these problem solving pieces. Some other tools that might help, visual checklists, having that listed. If your individual student or child is not huge into reading, I really would explore having good icons, imagery, visuals to help us sort of get there. Having printed prompt cards so they can go through that explicit instruction of trying out those different steps or different strategies. And again, they have that kind of cheat sheet to just kind of help them along in case they forget or not know where their place is. Or perhaps they make the decision they want to skip one particular step and try out a different tactic. Social stories are another great way, telling stories, whether it's imaginative or real. You'd be surprised, even with that Billy Goat's Gruff example, where I talked about the three goats who had to get past the troll. Not everything has to be rooted in nonfiction autobiographical content. Sometimes those fairy tales, those stories, things they heard, video games, movies, television shows, those can all be little prompters, especially if it's connected to what your child is interested in. Sometimes those social stories can do a lot of the learning for us, so we don't have to put our child or student into whatever situation is coming up in the content or subject matter that they're engaging with. Other tools that help: calendars, reminder apps, especially for pieces who might be distracted, maybe have split focus, or might be forgetful. And when that homework is due, you're creating tools that not only are going to be helpful for that English assignment, but might also be helpful for helping them to keep and retain their employment, or to remember a certain anniversary date, so that your partner is not going to, you know what today is. Hmm. Yep. And I got you something. What did you get me? What did I get you? I got you a surprise. And as soon as we both figure out what it is, I'm looking forward to. Wait, where are you going? So lastly, role-playing scenarios, characters, obstacles, tactics. And the way that we set that up, kind of like I said before, you have a main character. Usually that's your child, that's the student, right? And they have a goal, something they want to aim towards or get towards. There is something standing in the way, obstacle, which creates that conflict, natural to any story, from Lion King to War and Peace. And then what are their tactics? What's the strategies to get to that goal? And some of those tactics, some of those strategies might create other problems, but we'll deal with that as we kind of come along, but guiding them on that journey, guiding them through that thought process, helping them to reflect and seek out feedback after those tactics happen. That's all going to set your child up for success so that they can handle problems a little bit more independently and a little more self-sufficiently. Last couple of minutes as I get into the last few slides here. What does success look like, right? Well, of course, I can say it's going to look different for every individual child, but here are a couple examples, potentials that you might start to notice. That student is going to try before asking. Instead of always asking for permission on what to do, they might take some of that initiative to try it out. They might suggest or want to talk through different solutions. And maybe they're identifying certain tactics or strategies and wanting to get feedback on, hey, can I talk to you about something? Um, Maybe the student remains calm, emotionally regulated when they're frustrated because you've built up those resiliencies and perseverance. You've acknowledged that failure is just a natural part of the learning environment and a great teacher. And so failure becomes less heavy and it becomes more normal towards what that person is trying out. Mistake-friendly environment. Students learn from those successful attempts, and reinforce those small wins. This is how we grow confidence. If you see changes, you see evolution, you see learning happening, you positive praise in whatever ways that make sense for you, but reinforce those wins and especially acknowledge where you're starting to see the growth. And maybe if you're so inclined, maybe just sprinkling in a little bit of, wow, that was really great. I'm proud of you. I'm really proud of the way that you handled that problem. That can go a long way. All right, quick takeaways. Let them try, even if it gets messy. Guide with questions, not solutions. You're not the fixer. Use everyday moments for practice, even if you're starting off decision making of, what sandwich do you want? Turkey or ham, peanut butter or jelly, or ham and cheese? Identify those natural consequences, right? What happens as a result of some of those different strategies or tactics. Celebrate the small wins and communicate with school about strategies that have worked. Start to create that little inventory of successful strategies, whether that's for school use or whether that's for particular employment in the future use. We've got a Padlet, which is really just a resource database, a connector. It is free. It requires no sign up. You can see that little QR code. I don't know if I'm pointing at the right place, so I'll just point at both sides, and you'll get there. The Padlet is where you're looking for all sorts of different resources, recordings from past webinars that we're doing, and we've got that bit.ly link right there as well. My kid is 14 now. 14 being, of course, in Pennsylvania, where transition age technically starts, 14 to 21. So that's what we've got going on for you in April. As it comes to problem solving, So we've got a lot more pieces on the horizon, as well as we kind of take this parent info session as well. We'll be bringing it back a little bit later, and also, of course, with the remainder of the school year. So if you're watching us on socials, thanks so much. But we're going to go ahead and get ready to take this offline, even though it's online. So that's a bad phrasing, but we'll take it off of our Facebook and Instagram. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. And for any of our folks staying around on Zoom, we'll open it up if you have maybe any other individual questions, or we want to maybe dive into some more specific questions that we don't have to be quite as selective about. So I'll open
The
it up.
recording